If you have ever searched apartments for rent in New York City, most likely you came across properties that are listed as no fee. But what does having this no fee badge on the listing really mean? What is up, everyone? My name is Sargis. I'm New York City based real estate agent, and this channel is all about New York City real estate when it comes to buying, selling, or renting. This no fee thing is a common misconception that I see all the time with renters here in New York City. So in this video, we'll discuss in detail what does it really mean when you see a no fee listing, what is a broker's fee, how the rental transaction works, and what other fees to expect. The simplest way to answer this question, if you're looking at the listing where you see no fee sign, this means that the tenant does not pay the broker's fee. Usually the terms broker's fee and broker's commission are used interchangeably. This is the fee paid to the broker for completing the rental transaction, which in general includes the photography of the property, sometimes even video tours and virtual tours as well. Basically listing the property, advertising and marketing, showing it to prospective tenants, collecting applications, submitting to the landlord, preparing the lease, and depending on the type of the property, if it's a condo or a co-op, helping the landlord and the tenant complete all the necessary buildings paperwork, also known as the board package. Before we move on, I want to mention that you have to not only make sure that the apartment itself matches all your search criteria, but it's also very important to pay attention to the building type. The requirements, timeline, and the other fees that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this video can be different depending on the type of the property. When you're looking to rent an apartment, most likely you'll see either a condo, co-op, or a rental building. I'm not going into the details of the building types in this video since I already have that covered here. So watch this for a detailed breakdown on things that you should know as a renter, such as the differences between the buildings, how the process, timeline, and the requirements work for each. Now back to today's topic. So agents whose contacts you see on the listings, also known as listing agents, represent the landlord in a rental transaction. If you reach out to the agent directly and you see that there is a no fee sign, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have any fees whatsoever. This is where a lot of renters get confused with this no fee thing. This just means that the agent's commission will be paid by the landlord, and this has nothing to do with other building fees. And this brings us to the question, how exactly the rental transactions work. When you're starting the process, you have an option to either do this on your own or have an agent to represent you in the transaction. And the agent that you hired represents you in the transaction, whereas the listing agent represents the landlord. If you choose to go with this route and hire an agent to represent you, the typical services that you can expect from your agent are understanding your needs, pre-qualifying you for both the landlord and the building, which means making sure that you're not wasting your time in the buildings where you might not even be qualified for. Then finding the right properties for you, scheduling appointments, submitting your paperwork, negotiating on your behalf, basically watching out your best interest. In this case, if the apartment was no fee, the listing agent will be compensated by the landlord and your agent will be compensated by you. For some people, it makes sense to go with this route, hire an agent and have a professional assistant, and for others, it might be better to save some money and do this on their own without hiring an agent. But even if you decide to be on your own, in some cases, you will still be responsible for the broker's fee. These are basically the ones that are not no fee apartments. If you don't see this no fee sign, most of the time the listing description should specify who will be responsible for the broker's fee. But always clarify this with the listing agent. So if the landlord is not compensating the listing agent, that means that the fee will be paid by the tenant. The other situation to avoid the broker's fee can be simply if there is no broker involved, meaning the apartment is listed directly by the owner, or a lot of rental buildings have on-site leasing teams that are typically salaried employees who basically show the apartments to the prospective tenants and help them with the application and lease process. So in conclusion, if you don't hire an agent and decide to be on your own, and if there is no broker involved on the landlord side, meaning either the property was listed by the individual owner or the rental company, there won't be a broker's fee. If the owners or rental buildings decide to hire a broker to rent their units, the apartments can be either no fee for the tenant, meaning the landlord will cover the broker's fee, or the tenant will be responsible for the broker's commission, even though the broker represents the landlord and you are unrepresented in the transaction. The broker's fee can be either 1 month's rent, which is roughly 8% of your annual rent, or anywhere up to 15% of the annual rent. But besides the broker's fee, depending on the building type, there might be other fees that you need to be aware of and factor in those costs when making a decision. The most common fees that you see in a typical condo or a co-op building are application fee, processing fee, credit check fee, move-in fee, move-out fee, administrative fee, and so on. And a lot of buildings would also require a move-in deposit before you schedule your move-in. This is basically a refundable deposit to the building, and it's different than the security deposit for the apartment. Typically, your move-in deposit will be returned to you after your move-in is complete without causing any damage to the building's common areas. But always double check the refund timeline with the listing agent. The required building fees are different for every building. Some condos and co-ops can only have 1 or 2 small fees, and others can have all of those fees or even more. Some of those fees are paid to the management, and others are paid to the condo or co-op building itself, not the owner of the apartment. In 2019, significant changes were made regarding the rent laws in New York. If you don't want to read the whole act, I highly recommend to read at least the frequently asked questions so you are aware of what tenants and landlords can and cannot do. All you have to do is search on Google Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019. There are a lot of important information that you should know about if you're a renter or a landlord here in New York City. Now, if the building has a lot of fees and the tenant is responsible for the broker's fee as well, it doesn't automatically mean that you should just pass on that apartment. One apartment can be a no-fee apartment and might not have any building fees, or the building fees can be very minimum, and the other one can have a broker's fee and other building fees, but the monthly rent might be less. So always make sure you're comparing apple to apple when making a decision between 2 or more apartments. Besides the most obvious monthly rent, factor in all other fees as well, including the broker's fee, your application and move-in fees, when you are trying to determine the true overall cost and affordability of the apartment. That's it for today. Hopefully this video was helpful and clarified the meaning of no-fee apartments. If you got any value, liking the video and subscribing to the channel will be a huge favor to me so I can continue making New York City real estate videos. And lastly, watch this video you see on your screen if you want to know what are the 10 important questions that you need to ask before renting an apartment in New York City. Thanks for watching. Until next time.